Night work on highways follows a different logic than daytime work. The same stretch of road that carries thousands of vehicles at noon can feel like a different place entirely at 2 a.m. Not because the pavement changes, but because everything around it does. Night shift road crews, maintenance workers, emergency responders, truck drivers, toll operators spend their hours in an environment most people only pass through while half asleep. And in that environment, they notice things that vanish by sunrise. This isn't about danger or drama. It's about patterns. The kinds of observations that only become visible when you're present during the hours most people avoid. The first thing night workers notice is the silence between events. During the day, highway work is constant interruption. Traffic flows steadily. Radios crackle. Supervisors check in. There's always something competing for attention. At night, that texture disappears. A maintenance crew can work for 20 minutes without hearing a single voice. The gaps between vehicles stretch long enough that you can hear your own equipment more clearly than anything else. This changes how information moves. During the day, workers rely on constant updates, traffic reports, crew check-ins, shift changes overlapping with instructions. At night, updates come slower. You learn to operate with the assumption that what you knew an hour ago is still true, because no one's told you otherwise. Routine becomes the primary structure, not because night workers are more disciplined, but because routine is what fills the space where communication used to be. You don't wait for someone to tell you what's next. You already know what's next because you did it last night and the night before that. The darkness itself is less of an issue than people assume. Work lights are bright. Vehicles have better visibility equipment than they did 20 years ago. But the darkness does one thing consistently. It hides context. During the day, you can see a vehicle approaching from a quarter-mile away. You can watch its speed, see if it's drifting, notice if the driver's paying attention. At night, you see headlights. That's it. Two beams of light that tell you almost nothing until they're close. This makes anticipation harder. Day workers adjust to what they see. Night workers adjust to what they expect, based on patterns they've learned to recognize. Fatigue is present, but not in the way outsiders imagine. Night shift workers aren't fighting to stay awake. Most of them have been on this schedule long enough that their sleep patterns have adjusted. What they experience instead is a kind of cognitive flattening, a reduction in the number of things their brain tracks simultaneously. During the day, a worker might notice a dozen small details while completing a task. At night, that number drops, not because they're less competent, but because the brain prioritizes differently when it's operating outside natural waking hours. You notice fewer things, but the things you do notice become more significant. Decisions at night are made with less confirmation. During the day, if a crew sees something unusual, a vehicle parked on the shoulder, debris in a lane, an erratic driver, they can usually get a second opinion quickly. Another worker is nearby. A supervisor can drive over. Dispatch can send someone to verify. At night, verification takes longer. Crews are spread thinner. Dispatch is managing fewer people over a larger area. If you see something, you're often the only person who's going to see it for the next 10 minutes. This creates a specific kind of decision pressure. Not panic, not urgency, but a low-level requirement to commit without waiting. Night workers learn to trust their first read of a situation because there often isn't time for a second read. If a vehicle looks disabled, you treat it as disabled. If a debris field looks like it came from a blown tire, you assume that's what it is and act accordingly. What they prioritize shifts as well. During the day, efficiency matters, getting the work done quickly so traffic can resume normal flow. At night, predictability matters more. Workers want their actions to be readable by anyone approaching them, because the people approaching have less time to interpret what's happening. This is why night crews use more reflective markers, more warning lights, more exaggerated safety zones than day crews do for the same tasks. It's not about being more cautious. It's about being more legible in an environment where visibility is compromised. What night workers deliberately ignore is also specific. During the day, crews notice and respond to civilian behavior constantly. Drivers slowing down to look, people honking, passengers taking photos. At night, there's less of that, but when it does happen, workers ignore it more completely. If a vehicle slows down near a work zone at 3 a.m., night workers don't interpret it as curiosity. They interpret it as unpredictability, which means they keep distance and let it resolve itself. They don't engage. They don't acknowledge. They just make sure they're not in a position where that vehicle's behavior affects their work. Hesitation is more costly at night because the feedback loop is longer. If you hesitate during the day, someone will notice and adjust. If you hesitate at night, the gap you create stays open until you close it yourself. Other workers don't have the visibility to step in as easily. There are rules night workers follow that never appear in safety manuals. One is the spacing rule. Night crews position themselves farther apart than day crews do, even when working on the same task. This isn't written anywhere. It's just something that happens after a few months on night shift. The extra space accounts for the fact that if something goes wrong, help is farther away. Another is the light discipline rule. Workers learn not to shine their flashlights directly into the travel lanes unless absolutely necessary. Headlights from passing vehicles are already creating contrast problems for drivers. Adding more light sources doesn't always help. It can just add confusion. Experienced workers angle their lights downward or keep them pointed at their own work area. There's also a rule about radio brevity. Night workers use shorter transmissions than day workers, not because they're in a hurry, but because long conversations over the radio create the impression that something complicated is happening. On a night shift, that impression can cause other workers to start second-guessing their own situations. Experience matters more at night because these rules can't be taught efficiently. You can explain them, but they don't make intuitive sense until you've worked a dozen shifts and started noticing the consequences of not following them. New workers on night shifts often try to replicate the communication patterns they used during the day. Frequent check-ins, detailed explanations, asking for confirmation before acting. Experienced workers let them do this for a while, because it's not wrong exactly. It's just inefficient. Eventually, new workers notice that the experienced crew members are finishing tasks faster, even though they're not moving more quickly. The difference is that experienced workers aren't pausing to confirm things that don't need confirmation. They've internalized the decision points. What these rules actually do is reduce the number of variables workers have to actively manage. You don't have to think about spacing if you've learned to automatically position yourself a certain way. You don't have to think about light angles if your muscle memory already handles it. This is how night shift work becomes sustainable, not by making fewer decisions, but by making more of them automatically. When routines are followed, night shifts have a different rhythm than day shifts, but not necessarily a worse one. Work gets done. Incidents are managed. Crews finish their tasks and clear the zones. The main difference is that the work happens in longer, uninterrupted blocks. There's less stopping and starting, less adjustment to external factors. Some workers prefer this. The lack of interruption means you can settle into a task and complete it without having to reorient yourself every 15 minutes. When routines are ignored, the consequences are often logistical rather than dangerous. A crew that doesn't space themselves properly ends up taking longer to complete tasks because they're constantly adjusting to each other's positions. A worker who over-communicates on the radio creates confusion that slows down other crews. Safety outcomes are similar between day and night shifts when you account for volume. Night shifts see fewer incidents overall, but that's primarily because there are fewer vehicles on the road. The rate of incidents per vehicle is not dramatically different. What does change is response time. When something does go wrong at night, it takes longer to marshal resources. Fewer people are on duty. Equipment is staged farther apart. This makes the first few minutes more critical, which is why night workers tend to be more self-reliant. Efficiency at night is measured differently. During the day, a crew that completes a task 10 minutes early is ahead of schedule. At night, a crew that completes a task without needing to call for additional support is operating efficiently. The standard isn't speed, it's self-sufficiency. These patterns make sense only from inside the work. From a passing vehicle, night shift road crews look like they're doing the same job as day crews, just in the dark. And in many ways they are. Same tasks, same equipment, same outcomes. But the logic that shapes how those tasks get done is different. Not better, not worse. Just calibrated to an environment where information is harder to confirm, decisions need to be made with less input, and routine carries more weight than instruction. The things night workers notice, the silence between events, the way light behaves, the cost of hesitation, aren't visible to people who only see highways during the day. Which is fine. Most of those observations only matter if you're the one working through them.